The Formula One of the 70s. A dangerous sport like few, racing cars launched at 300 km/h and driven by risk riders ready to do anything to have glory, as Daniel Bruhl said playing Niki Lauda in the film Rush, was a world made up of rebels, madmen, and dreamers. Among these was one who is remembered today only for his tragic end and not for his career. A film career where the impassive protagonist, among 1,000 problems, various difficulties, overcomes everything and everyone along that unfortunately too short path. It all begins at Esther. In the cold Midlands town, you don't breathe all this air of engines, if anything of rugby, football and chips. Among the fumes of the English chimneys, near Ashby de la Suche, is born a child with red hair, a sweet expression, a cunning laugh, and a face half full of ephelids. And on February 2nd, 1949, that child will one day be for many the next great promise of British motoring. That kid's name is Roger Williamson. Roger is the third and last child of Dodge and Hilda Williamson. She has two older sisters, Barbara and Nola, age 14 and 16 respectively. Roger was the surprise of life, with his parents already in advanced age. Dad Dodge is a mechanic, originally from Norfolk, moved to Esther after the First World War. He prepares race cars for speedway competitions, and over the years he has taken away some satisfaction also as a driver, both on the speedway and on the karts. In addition to his workshop, he runs a wedding car rental company, disposing of 10 Rolls-Royces, 5 white and 5 black. And among the various staff members there is also a very young Roger. Mother Hilda was born and raised in Esther. At the age of 4, little Roger receives from his father a car equipped with a lawnmower engine built by Dodge himself, so as to allow him to turn in the garden of his house in Burt Beerot, the first suburb northeast of Leicester. During his childhood, as mentioned, Roger prefers to spend his days helping his father in the workshop rather than studying, but still getting a good education. As the years pass, Roger understands that this is more and more his world and, spurred on by Dad Dodge, succeeds in his intent, in fact participates in small speedway races a letter. There is a moment in his childhood, though, when Roger doesn't seem so destined for an automotive career. At the age of 11 he started riding a bike, but unfortunately his legs were still too short, so he puts the idea aside and immediately takes a steering wheel in his hands. That steering wheel that will never give up. But to race in a championship, he has to wait a couple of years, which he spends, however, not sitting idly by. In fact, he goes on the track to observe the others. He learns to run, continues to work in the family workshop, and as soon as he can, he gets behind the wheel of a motor vehicle. At the age of 12, his first racing cart arrived and he tested the streets of Nürburgring Road South, so as to accumulate as much experience as possible. What do you say? Happy he, happy everyone, but Mahilda, despite being happy to see her son realize sometimes, avoids seeing him run. She's afraid car races are too dangerous for her. The sisters also think so. Papa Dodge is Sister Barbara's future father-in-law. On weekends, Roger teams up. At the age of 14 comes the big moment for Roger, who is not welcomed unprepared. Finally, after years of dreams and working in Dad's kitchen to disassemble and prepare karts, he is finally ready to wear helmet vest for the English Kart Championship, in which he is immediately among the protagonists. Roger's first rivals at the time had their little notoriety. One of them, for example, is Roger Kill. He started racing karts at the age of 17, and in 1963 won the championship, beating Roger, who was still a kid and a little inexperienced, but who, however, they finished in second place with 76 points against the Kiosk Center. From 62 to 66, Roger quickly moves from the junior category to the senior one, and A17 wins the English Championship, beating experienced guys like Thompson, Sunderland, Lawson and Norton, just to name a few. In all, Roger took home 125 karting trophies, also setting the kart speed record for the time of 117 MEP shorts or 188 km/h. Trophies are now real relics, unguarded with care by his family, together with many photos and awards. The years go by, Roger grows up, but it's as if I've remained the always smiling child that everyone remembers. A loving boy, playful, lively, sunny, but in some respects also a little cold, especially when the visor drops. Racing is his only love. He's not a particular fan of football, but occasionally supports Leicester City's Foxes. In the workshop, in the car, at home, Roger almost always listens to music. She is a lover of rock and T-Rex in particular, a very popular group in England between the late 60s and early 70s. His niece Joan told us that she listened to their music all the time, especially the Happy Dawn song, using a stereo 8-box music player that she also took with her in the car. Joan also says that I could see that Roger Agusti was more of a Rolling Stones than a Beatle. For the rest, he was an extremely grateful boy for everything, and he never hid, not even in interviews, his praise and love for his family, and what was his girlfriend Rosalind, known to all as Rose, known during the Thistles period. Immediately after reaching the age of majority, Roger gets his British driving license and immediately enters the Salon Car Championship, preparing together with his friend Chris Rendell a Mini 850. The result at the end of the season is incredible. Out of 18 races, he wins 14 victories, recording various records, including the one at Melleray Park, won both on the original track and in the one with. It's 1967, and despite being a year full of successes, the English Red keeps his feet on the ground. He knows that there is a lot to work on. He wants to grow and reach higher and higher goals, and he certainly does not lack character. 1968, however, does not give much satisfaction. Indeed, after having tried and purchased a Cooper T72 Formula 3, it catches fire and damages not a little the boy's morale. In the meantime, he returned to Snetterton with a Mini Cooper 1003, and at the same time bought and developed a Ford Anglia, with which he won a first, 2 seconds and a third place. Then he also tries another Cooper T72. But Cowell Park has an accident. He comes out unharmed, but the single-seater is totally irrecoverable. But in 1969, Roger got off to a strong start with his Ford Andrea, with 4 wins at Melleray Park, at Croston, 2 second places at Silverstone and Brian Edge, and a third at Netherton. In this period of races also takes place a rather particular and funny episode. During a race weekend in Melleray Park, Sister Barbara takes her daughter Joanne with her, who as soon as she sees Uncle Roger goes crazy. It's one of the few times she sees him running, and at one point she asks her uncle if he'll take her for a drive. Uncle Roger agrees and sits Joanne in the passenger seat. They go on the track, and as long as they are on the straight, everything is okay. But already at the first corner, things change. They go 2 laps with Joanne screaming the whole time. Uncle's going a little too fast. Back in the garage, Joanne gets out of the car. And used and also very scared, but at the same time he is happy to have taken a ride with his uncle in a saloon championship car. It comes 1970, and the prerequisites for a positive year are all there. The English Red is no longer just one of the many emerging talents, that one is. In the 70s Saloon Championship, there's none for anybody. Roger is in a class above all others. He has a magical touch. He's that natural gift that gives you that extra edge. Finally, all his work, passion and talent are finally rewarded. In fact, it was the year in which he won the Lippolite Englisher Special Salon Car Championship, with 3 victories at Adulton Park, 3 at Bresage, 2 at Castelcombe, and 1 at Crystal Palace and Troxton, along with other podium finishes. The English Red unleashed, and with a vintage like this, thinks to finally rise in category. And in fact, in 1971, he landed in the British Formula 3 Championship, driving a March 7113M. Roger did not take long to adapt to the new Costo and immediately proved competitive, although he won few races too often. Engine reliability problems. But it is at the Formula 3 race in Monaco that his life is about to change. For itself, the race is not the best. A contact and other troubles in Klingon Roger to win is David Day Walker, already started towards a good career and among the closest friends of Williamson and the paddock. Roger instead, after closing the race in 7th place, has his March with the engine now gone. It needs to be changed, but there are neither the necessary parts nor enough money. Even in case of rain, he would have raced with the only available dry tires. I mean Roger. For a budget, he is in bad shape, but while in the pits, a man approaches who is intrigued by the boy working on the car engine, asks him if he wants a new engine. Roger remains disturbed and timidly tells him yes, despite not having the slightest idea who this gentleman is who he had already met before. In a later interview with Ian Phillips, Roger says he first saw him in Melody Park during the Salon races, Carl being impressed because I saw him approach curiously to his truck, where along with the stand and the car, Roger is his team. They offered tea to passers-by, to drivers, in short, to all the people in the paddock. The man who offers Roger a new engine is Tom Whitcroft, owner of Domington Park, a businessman and great racing enthusiast. Tom is looking for new adventures, new stimuli, and a new driver who wants to launch at the highest levels. He also did it in 1969 with Derek Bell, but Rocher represents a great opportunity that will later transform into a great friendship with an almost father-son relationship. Frederick Bernard Whitcroft, known as Tom, was born at Donington Castle in 1922. Named Tom because his uncle called him Tom Tom, a name that would remain with him for life. Tom at a young age took part in the Second World War as a soldier and pilot of Carlo Armati, and in his life, in addition to having seen pilots die on the racetracks, he has seen many too many comrades fall in the war. Whitcroft even found himself fighting in the expedition for the liberation of part of southern Italy between 3 and 17 September 1943 in Salerno, Taranto and Calabria. At the end of the war he started his own business, also collecting vintage cars. In 1970 he bought a Brabham BT26 and with Derek Bell participated in a series of races in the Tasmanian Championship, finishing second and also racing in Formula 2 with a Brabham BT30. But let's go back to the Formula 3 Monaco 71 race. Roger, to thank Tom for the new engine, shows up in front of his house wearing a greasy mechanic's overalls and 2 tickets for the next race and the beginning of the partnership between the two. With the arrival of at his first year is aboard a hand place, Roger wins the Lombard Formula 3 Championship with 90 points and finishing second in the Shell Series with 56 points for a total of 14 wins. During the season, the last at Alton Park defined in an interview by Roger his favorite race, battling to the last with Daywalker. He then repeated himself at Crystal Palace, accumulating other accolades, being awarded at the end of the year as BP Man of the 1971 Growood Award and Driver of the Year by both the British and Racing and the Sport Car Club. Roger is growing race by race, and the results are proof of that. In the environment, many already see him as a future world champion. Despite everything, Roger remains humble, a normal guy who loves to have fun in his Leicester with his Jaguar E-Type, his first girlfriend Rosa, and with the rest of his family. He doesn't even leave his dad's workshop, where he continues to work and earn money to run, despite the help of a down-to-earth boy. In short, he is loved by everyone. For 1972, Roger and Tom hypothesized to switch to Formula 2, but in the end decided to stay at least at the beginning of the year in Formula 3, and then decide what to do based on the results of the season and gradually advance category. In the paddock, he is among the most feared drivers on the grid, if not the most feared, as many say Roger is the man to beat. Among the opponents, in addition to Dave Walker, there are Tony Bryce, David Purley, Tom Price, Patrick DeBay, Vittorio Brambilla, Alan Jones, Jody Scheckter and James Sand. Roger and James have in common being very friendly, likable and damn fast. But other than that, the character gap between the two is remarkable. The London blonde, as we know, is one with an unruly life, full of vices and women, while the red Leicester loves to have fun, enjoy life, be surrounded by beautiful girls, but in a decidedly more balanced way, and be a hard worker. The two are not great friends, but they have a deep respect for each other, even on the track and in battle. The 72 season therefore promises to be intense, full of rivals ready to beat the English Red. He himself told Diane Phillips in an interview for Autosport, "I like competition, especially when you feel the tension created on you by your opponents. It means you really are the man to beat." All the young emerging British and European players, in fact, are very strong and must be kept at bay if the results of the previous year are to be repeated. Other rivals already mentioned include Van der Poelon and Ricky van Opel. Roger awaits the new season but continues to work. The pressure of the winner is felt but manages to manage it, while Tom works to give his boyfriend the best car possible. At the beginning of the season, Roger competes with a March, but it turns out not to be very fast, and so together with Tom they decide to run with an AGR-D for the rest of the season. A choice that turned out to be the right one. Roger in fact obtained 2 Adalton Park victories, 2 ACA, 2 at Park, 2 at Troxton and 1 at Silverstone, the Chatton Understop, plus other points placements. He also won the Forward Trust title with 50 points and the Shell Championship with 78 points. In addition to racing in Formula 3, Roger also managed to make his debut in other categories with single appearances in Formula Atlantic on Unagra.de, in Formula 5000 on a Kitchmack, obtaining a 6th and a 7th place respectively. The English Red made it, confirmed the results of the previous year, and continued to grow race by race, season by season, with 1972. 1973 was the year of Formula 1. In fact, his name also arrives in the paddocks of the top Formula teams. He was already talked about before, but timidly, also to give him time to grow. But now everyone wants it. Everyone praises Leicester's talent also in Italy, especially thanks to the articles in Autosprint magazine. And the winter of 1973 and Roger prepares for the start of the new season with a novelty. Tom not only finds him a steering wheel in Formula 2 with an AGR-D for the European Championship, but in February something important begins to move. Louis Stanley, owner of Team Marlboro.ARM, racing in Formula 1, called him to test his cars, the 1972 P180 and the P160. The first driver, Clay Regazzoni, is absent from the tests and therefore a replacement must be found. And the great opportunity, Roger is immediately fast and laps on the same times as a certain Niki Lauda while driving for the first time a Formula One car. He, Stanley, is enchanted by this guy, wants him with him in BRE, but unfortunately he can only offer him the place as third driver, and then gradually re-evaluate the hierarchies, even if the presence token is not completely guaranteed. He has a contract with the team for 2 years, but manager Tom Withcroft is not convinced of the BRME engine. Then a 2-year contract doesn't give you that much freedom, so they turn down the offer amicably. And they start looking for a more competitive seat. But this choice, as we will see later, unfortunately will not turn out to be entirely correct. Roger's place in BRM will then be taken by Belletoise. Roger continues the year of the new European Formula 2 Championship with one GRD273. Whipcroft, however, is close to a deal with McLaren and Hartley, but it doesn't go through because the team prefers Jody Scheckter and Roger, and that's how the march goes forward. Max Mosley's team needs a driver for the races in Great Britain, Holland and Italy to replace first driver Jean-Pierre Jacquer, also engaged in the Formula 2 Championship where he is dominating and does not want to miss the title. Whitcroft believes it and Roger is ready to take the big leap. Finally, the opportunity of a life has arrived also because after the previous refusal to Ala BRM, there is precisely the performance of the March that in the 1972 had obtained excellent placements compared to Ala BRM. In the meantime, however, there is a European Formula 2 Championship to be conquered that starts on the small home circuit of Melody Park, but which is not entirely exhilarating as it only holds a 9th place. Things do not improve in Germany. At the Hockenheimring, the car does not give signs of competitiveness at the Drugstone Ring Trophy. In the second heat, in the rain, Roger started from pole position ahead of Hokemas Sartis, Vittorio Brambilla and De Payet's Alpinelli. At the start, Brambilla withdraws immediately for breaking the accelerator, while Roger due to an error. He drops to 6th position, but turning constantly on good times, and thanks also to the problems of his opponents, he finds himself again in the lead. Unfortunately, at the end of the race, a tire abandoned him and he finished in 8th position. The race was surprisingly won by Henry Pescarolo. After another disappointing weekend at the Nürburgring, the European Championship moves to France at the Po. In the first heat, under the rain, Roger conquers an excellent second place behind the stable meeting Brambilla. In the end, adding up the times, Roger takes 7th place. Meanwhile, in case Gear D, the atmosphere is not the best. Roger wants to win, he wants to fight with the first, but the car is unreliable and uncompetitive. At the beginning of the championship, he was among the favorites for the final victory, and instead now finds himself fighting for low-ranking positions. On top of that, Roger and his Rose break up, but the motor show gets to know Jackie through Ian Phillips. But it's not a great period for the Red, which still doesn't give up. A Nivel Yarrier on a BMW-powered March does a double, while Roger flies with Magazine. Due to a failure of the car, the impact is tremendous. Roger remedies, fortunately only some bruising, it is a bloody nose. But the pit's back, black, face and limping. This is the last straw. The patience is officially over. Tom realizes the situation. Roger is not happy, and after the accident in Nivelles, his strong character also suffers. Angry and frustrated, Roger blurts out, "The results are not what he expected. They are not acceptable results for a guy who wants to climb into Formula One and who needs motivation. Of stimuli and victories to get ready for the big leap." This is how Rouen changes. The team buys a March BMW 732, which with Charlie is dominating the championship. Roger smiles again in qualifying, he regains competitiveness, but his smile fades immediately. Jerry Burrell, a Chevron driver with an almost certain future in Formula One, dies in an accident caused by a flat tire in the New World Corner. Due to a poorly positioned guardrail, the car ends its journey in the middle of the trees about 200 meters from the impact. Many are questioning their participation in the race for safety reasons. The pilots who arrived at the scene of the accident, in fact, by resting their hand on the guardrail and with minimal effort managed to move it, it is too dangerous. The race direction decides to make some changes at that point of the circuit, creating a variant delimited by pieces of polystyrene, thus managing to satisfy everyone. For Rocher, the race turned out to be disappointing, however, despite a dominant clue. But at the end of June, there is a new possibility of redemption. In fact, there is a very important race to win, the Monza Lottery. The European Formula 2 therefore lands in the Temple of Speed. The opponents to beat are always Patrick Depailler. Coulon is the home rider Vittorio Brambilla, being a Monzador. And June 29th, and for Roger and the apotheosis. He won in Monza and is very happy on the podium. Now he is definitely ready for the big leap into the top formula. This brings us to July 11th, 1973, and the long-awaited day, that of his debut in Formula One. We are Silverstone and the atmosphere is perfect. What could be better than making his home Grand Prix debut is Roger's dream come true. Letter's boy has come a long way. The apprenticeship, the non-stop work in the workshop, the many sleepless nights have paid off, and then the great luck of having met Tom and him who brought him to Formula One, and Roger will be forever grateful to him. On Saturday, Roger managed to qualify in 22nd position, 3 seconds and 2 behind Ronnie Peterson's pole. Not bad as a debut, also because the places on the grid are limited, and just qualifying means being among the strongest. There's a lot of competition, but Roger has already shown what he's made of. His limit, however, is his March. The 731, in fact, is a disappointing car. Even with Charrier, it never scored points. Mosley and his teammates focused entirely on Formula 2. All the development work is dedicated to the BMW engine, not to the Cosworth of the top series. But we get to Sunday's race, it's July 14th, and the sky at Silverstone is covered with grid clouds. Everything is ready, and England's 26th Grand Prix starts in the lead. Jackie Stewart sprints immediately, Roger is in the back, but starts to overtake opponents at the end of the Woodcote curve. Before the straight, Stewart is in the lead. Patterson and Sever pass, but behind them comes the hell out of it, Jody Scheckter. He lost control of his McLaren just as Woodcote exited and 13 cars crashed into him, with 11 drivers forced to retire. Among these, unfortunately, there is also Roger, who after leaving Woodcote sees a lot of dust rising and cars turning upside down. And when it starts to slow down, it's too late. He finds himself in front of Shepard's McLaren, and in the general confusion, he can do nothing to avoid the impact against Stokes Sartis and the pit wall, where the gear rises and lands again, completely shattering. The chassis is heavily damaged, as is the suspension and the entire bodywork. In pieces, Roger realizes the dangerous position, gets out of what remains of his car and runs away his car, and the others have lost liquids. Although his March, however, only loses water from the radiators, but it is better to give it a go. However, Andrej Riadovic, a former pilot and historic television host and commentator, had the worst chance, who impacted head-on the rear of the Betoise BRM, breaking both legs. It takes almost an hour to get it out of the sheets. An accident that also decreed the end of his career in Formula One. Luckily, Roger escaped and is fine, declaring how lucky they were, given that there was no fire despite the cars having full tanks. The March, however, is badly reduced, and putting it back together within 2 weeks will be hard. And the next race is in Holland, in Zandvoort, and we must therefore not waste time. We must get the 731 to Bister as soon as possible to the headquarters of La Marche. Despite everything, however, Roger is happy. He knows there is a lot of work to do, but for him, being Mr. Whitcroft, the way is right. And there is no shortage of smiles, as during the previous weekend at Silverstone, in which a fair was also organized for the race, where Roger has fun on bumper cars together with the almost inevitable presence of his new girlfriend Jackie. Jackie, years later, in interviews, talks about her relationship with Roger and, albeit in a discreet way, says, "I knew what I was facing, being the girlfriend of a pilot with its positive and negative sides. I was warned." The first time we met was thanks to Jan Phillips, who insisted to go with him to a race. Roger wasn't my ideal boyfriend, but he always made me smile. He was very nice, loving, and these things over time made the difference. He knew the dangers he was running, and unfortunately once, talking about the risks, he told me that his biggest fear, besides the trees on the track, was fire. He told me no matter what, but no, I don't want to end up like that. His father was afraid that I would distract him from the races, and instead he always gave his best. We were happy, and before the Dutch Grand Prix he told me, 3-4 more races left and I will give you an engagement ring. But now I can't think about it, and I wasn't thinking about it either. That kind of nonsense doesn't work for me. The important thing was to be happy. At that time I had a business in London that I sometimes missed because Roger took me to the races. I've done laps with him in the car on almost every track, even at high speed. I then tried to help him as much as possible during the races, even if, for example, taking lap times was not for me. But let's go back to the races. Waiting for Mr. to fix the car, there is one last Formula 2 race to be played at Misano Adriatico, circuit today named after Simon Charlie, not valid for the ranking and where Roger takes home a first place in race 2, and an excellent injection of confidence in view of the next commitment in Formula 1. But to Mr. the work still requires time and energy, and after the race in Misano, Roger finds himself in front of a crossroads. The 731 will be ready for Zandvoort also thinks of abdicating the Dutch race and going to Sweden for the round of Formula 2, despite knowing that he can still not win the championship. Instead, almost at the last minute, Max Mosley informs him that the March is ready to hit the track in Holland and that it has also been equipped with some updates. Roger arrives on Thursday, getting up strong in a good mood. He wants to race in the top series this weekend, and almost miraculously his car is there, ready for him. And on Friday 27th July, the sky is overcast and the free practice session begins. It started to rain hard. The best time was set by Niki Lauda. Roger was late, but the rain turned the whole session upside down. In fact, there are those who do not make any fast laps so as not to risk. Saturday instead is characterized by the accident of Emerson Di Tipaldi, direct opponent of Stewart in the race for the title. The Brazilian has bruises to his legs, a foot and a blow to the ribs. Roger instead improves and manages to qualify in 18th position, and despite not being fully satisfied with the car, having charge. A clutch problem. The mood and atmosphere are great. Tomorrow we can have a great race. And the night before the race, and Roger spends it in the company of his Jackie. She sips wine, he spends the evening thinking with that mix of anxiety and pre-race adrenaline on him. He is already thinking coldly about how to get back together and go as strong as possible. He knows that his gear is not the most performing between the readings for himself and the grid, but he will try to finally bring points to Beaster's team, and above all give himself his first championship points. It's the day of the race, the long-awaited one, and before entering the cockpit, Roger says to Whitcroft, "Tom, here we go, today they'll see what I'm worth." Sunday 29th July 1973. The warm-up is done before the race that will start 13 minutes late, and in the general chaos, Roger is just in time to leave the pit lane and line up, but arriving at the meeting for the race late, just managing to have a quick chat with the idol of the house, James Van Lennep. After a quick briefing with race director Ben Hisman, the race begins. There are 72 laps to complete. Ronnie Peterson is in the lead. Roger starts very strong, and after 5 laps he has already recovered 5 positions, also thanks to a header by Laura. Jackie Oliver withdraws with the ascetic. And on the second lap, Emerson Five-Caldi can no longer handle the physical effort. He has too much pain. He has to retire. Roger, however, is closely followed by Purley and Graham Hill. But after several laps, the March leg does not seem to be able to keep up with the Red March number 14 and the competitive wickedness of its driver. The 7th lap begins. Wetterson is still in the lead. Roger defends himself well from Purley and seems to have the pace to go and reach the first sails. But suddenly at the exit of the Handelbach, something goes wrong, and as he prepares to enter the tunnel, the left front tire of Roger's Archie explodes. When I stand before God at the end of my life, I hope I have not wasted even a crumb of talent, and I can say that I have used everything he has given me. Roger Williamson was 24 years old. Mosley, Whitcroft and the team see only Gramil pass. A thick black smoke rises between the dunes. Everyone runs towards the truck, where there is the TVA. See what happened. Ben Hisman, convinced that circuit safety is doing its job, is also complicit in the lack of news. David Purley, despite being in the race, does not hesitate for a moment to stop seeing Roger's march upside down in flames, launches himself among them and tries in every way to save Roger, trying to overturn the march alone. No one helps him. He snatches an insufficient fire extinguisher from the hands of a commissioner, but it's all useless. He stretches his arms desperately towards the commissioners, towards the public in search of help. He signals his colleagues to stop, but they mistakenly believe that he is the driver of the car. In flames, Purley alone. Desperate, surrenders the tragedy to an atrocious, absurd end. He will be awarded the Medal of Valor for bravery. Jackie is escorted out of the racetrack and sent to her hometown, Bedford, on the first available flight. Tom Whitcroft will then be forced to go to Harlem Hospital with Stanley for the sad duty of identifying poor Roger's body. Tom's secretary has the tough task of notifying his family abroad. The harsh reality of that still too dangerous golden age takes another night away as she pursues her dream. Tom Whitcroft will return to Esther, will continue his entrepreneurial activity, but tea and chats with his golden boy will unfortunately only be memories. A story too good but also too short of a boy full of life, passion and determination, whose talent was never questioned even when things didn't go right. Roger Williamson has not been forgotten, and although he only raced 2 races in Formula One, many remember him in the minor categories when he said less to an autograph, a photo or a chat. He was a simple boy, one of the people, a humble working class boy who had made it without ever changing his way of being. Even after he turned professional in July 2003 at Donington Park on the 30th anniversary of his death, a statue was dedicated to him in the presence of relatives, friends and journalists. The statue, hidden beneath a huge British flag, is revealed by Tom Whitcroft and Roger's sister Barbara. Also present is Jackie, who leaves us in 2020. In 2021, Barbara also passes away, while Nola, Roger's older sister, lives in Pennsylvania and is 90 years old. Also at the ceremony was Ben Hisman, who, as we said, was Zandvoort's race director. He himself will declare that he regrets for life not having stopped the race. Ben Hisman dies in 2022. On the statue, Tom had it written, "No one could take his place in my heart." Tom Whitcroft left us in 2009. Tom also has an entire section in his collection in the Donington Museum since 2018, but unfortunately the museum has closed its doors and all the cars, including Roger's, are in a safe warehouse. Today, the site of Roger's accident is a golf course that was turned into one to save the Zandvoort racetrack from bankruptcy in the late 1980s. Now that we know better the history of this unfortunate champion, it is enough to talk only about the accident, and we therefore hope that we have contributed to keep alive the memory of Roger Williamson, who deserved and deserves much more than a few essay lines. On 29 July 2023, on the 50th anniversary of his death, he will be commemorated in his Leicester by Kevin Whitcroft, together with relatives, friends and fans. 50 years is a long time, but Roger is still with us, because no one dies while he lives in the hearts of those who remain.